Who do you look up to in your church? Is it the pastor, the preacher, a Bible class teacher? Maybe it's an aunt or an uncle that have been a part of that church for a very long time, or someone else you know that's a part of the fabric of that group of people. Do you have someone in mind? Picture that person in your mind. See their face in your mind. Now, let me ask you a question. Is that in fact someone you ought to look up to? Is that the person you should emulate? Is that the person that sets the right bar that you want to achieve? I hope it is. I really do. But today's ultimatum may cause us to step back and rethink that. This ultimatum is found in Matthew 5:20. Like several other ultimatums, this one is spoken by Jesus during the Sermon on the Mount. The audience is important here because it gives us context on which to consider this ultimatum. Jesus told the crowd gathered there, "Unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven." We hear these words some 2,000 years after they were spoken, and they probably don't really mean that much to us. But those in attendance would have probably been shocked by these words. Who were the scribes? Well, the easiest way to describe it is probably to say that they were the lawyers of that time. In a time when only about 5% of the population could read and write, so much of daily life and society depended on these scribes. They wrote up contracts. They interpreted contracts. They determined right and wrong in many instances. Because of their literacy, when 95% of the population wasn't literate, they had tremendous influence and status in society. If you think lawyers have a big impact on our society today, try to imagine the impact they would have had back then when only 1 out of 20 people could even read. And who were the Pharisees? They were another group of people that stood out due to their influence and status. Their authority and status was from a religious perspective. These were the people that knew the Jewish law better than anyone else. Just like the scribes, they could be described as legal experts, particularly with regard to Jewish law and tradition. If you wanted a role model for adhering to Jewish law and tradition, look no further than the Pharisees. So when Jesus says that a person's righteousness must exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees, many in the crowd probably thought, well, that's impossible. These were the elite people of society that could read and write. They maintained the laws. They interpreted the laws. They made judgments on the law. How could people that didn't even know how to read and write possibly compete with that, let alone exceed their righteousness? I can only imagine the murmur that must have gone through the crowd when Jesus said that. But he did say it. So what does it mean? We could tackle this from a variety of perspectives, but I'll share one with you and then leave it with you to think about it further. Righteousness, which Jesus talks about here, needing to exceed that of the scribes and the Pharisees, is a matter of being in a right standing with God. It doesn't have anything to do with your position you have in your church, how well known you are, how influential you are in your religious circles. A person in those situations may or may not be righteous. Holding some status or position doesn't guarantee that a person is righteous. As a matter of fact, oftentimes these earthly positions and the status that goes with them are a great temptation to be drawn into self-righteousness or attracted to power or the notoriety that comes along. It becomes all too easy to focus on keeping up your appearance of righteousness when in reality you're drawn more by the recognition of men than by the humble submission to God. looks can be deceiving. So Jesus gives the crowd some great advice in the form of an ultimatum. He tells them that their righteousness must exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees, and that if it doesn't, they'll not enter the kingdom of heaven. He's telling them to measure themselves against the right thing. He's telling them to stop using the scribes and Pharisees as their measuring stick. And as he continues talking to the crowd in the rest of chapter 5 and on into chapter 6 and chapter 7, over and over again he tells them what the new measuring stick looks like. He speaks of loving your enemies, giving to the needy, not judging others, how to pray, how to put your trust in God, how to treat others, and how to build your house on the solid foundation of Jesus' words. In other words, He is the measuring stick for your righteousness. If you want to get to heaven, Jesus must be the role model we look to. He must be the example of righteousness we strive for. I'm not telling you not to admire certain people that you know, but I'm confident that this ultimatum from Jesus is a clear reminder to keep our ultimate focus and goal on the right thing. We can't afford to settle for an earthly target of righteousness when Jesus left heaven, came to earth, and gave us a much higher target to guide us and inspire us. Jesus warns us with this ultimatum that if we aim at the wrong target, we won't get the reward we're really after. I encourage you to read Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7 with this ultimatum in mind. I promise it'll be helpful. We'll leave it there for today. The ultimatum in our next video is a little different from the ones we've looked at so far. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in that next video.